So in this video, we're going to talk about gua sha and how it can help remove puffiness from your face. So you wake up, you get out of bed, you head into the bathroom, and there's something odd about the person looking back at you in the mirror. It's not the same person who you remember looking in the mirror the night before. And that's because your face has become puffy. While puffiness has the effect of smoothing out wrinkles, it also has the effect of making your face look kind of weird. Other people might not notice a thing, but to you, one part of you has been disturbed in its symmetry in the face in some way. And every time you look, you notice it. Now, it's pretty common in my clinic to see people with all kinds of fluid retention, not just in the face. Many people have edema in their legs and also swelling in the abdomen or puffy arms and legs or hands and feet. On the face, the most common is puffiness around the eyes, and it could be the face and the cheek in general, and it's often in the morning. So what's causing this retention and what can you do about it? Well, there are many causes. When I was a child, my face once swelled up like a balloon, but that was because a bee stung my tongue. I had my mouth open and the bee came in and it stung me. And actually one of the reasons for facial swelling can be an allergic reaction, but not quite as lethal as the reason for my swelling. It could be something as simple as leaving your makeup on overnight. The chemical interplay with your skin then creates a reaction which is temporary and one which should go with a short amount of time. Another common temporary puffiness can come from drinking alcohol, for example. One of the potential after effects of drinking alcohol is dehydration. And when this happens, your body compensates by a process of enlarging the blood vessels and the retention of liquid. Another one is a lack of or too much sleep. And although this can be a chronic issue as well, especially when someone suffers from sleep disorders like insomnia. Now, puffiness, which might stem from a certain food type, is more like an allergic reaction, but can easily be a chronic problem connected with the stomach's ability to digest certain foods. In my first book, there are lists of foods according to how they're categorized when they go into the digestive process. There's a certain category which is named damp. And if you think about what damp is when you come across it, it's wet, it's sticky, it's difficult to get rid of when it appears. We used to have damp on one of our interior walls when we had our clinic in Malia in North Africa. And it was wet with a constant leak from the pipes, which is in this old building. And you just couldn't get rid of it. The walls were made of sand, actually, and this is one of the problems, actually, of the houses which were built in Malia. As the essential ingredient was sand, and they were built back in the 1940s. And because of this sand, and it grew to have its own weird looking mold, which seemed to have a life of its own. And eventually we just gave up and it became kind of a resident on the wall of our clinic. And that's really what these food types are like inside. They kind of become part of you. And for most people, they're part of the balance of the different food types, and there isn't anything negative about having food which is classified as damp. And on the contrary, they're actually very, very highly nutritious foods like milk and cheese and bananas and fruit juice. But for some, your stomach just can't digest them. They're just too nutritious. In fact, one of the ways you know that your stomach can't digest them well is the appearance of bloating, which is retention of fluid. For some women, swelling in their face can be related to their monthly cycle, so that although it's temporary, it's part of a much wider issue, often accompanied with symptoms of premenstrual syndrome. Other reasons might be a local problem in the nasal area, like a sinus infection, or something more systemic, like hypothyroidism. This is when your thyroid gland isn't producing enough hormones, and you'd know this because it's often accompanied by other symptoms like weight gain, fatigue, poor cold tolerance, dry skin, and thinning hair. For some people, puffiness is just a part of them. It might run in your family, So you're always going to get it to some extent. It might be part of getting old. Eye puffiness can partly be caused when fatty tissue, which normally sits in the orbital cavity and protects your eye, starts to push forward and fill in spaces below the eye. This happens because of a thinning of the membrane, which usually keeps fat in place in both the upper and lower eyelids. And as this membrane thins, the fat herniates and pushes forward, causing puffy eyes and dark circles and bags under the eyes. So how are we going to approach puffiness with gua sha? You could just get a tool and scrape at the puffiness in the hope that you're going to physically remove the retained liquid. You could talk about lymphatic drainage and lymph nodes. And you wouldn't be wrong. There's nothing wrong with doing anything like that. But it's just not actually coming from the roots of gua sha. In fact, if you were just to do that, you'd be missing the other fascinating things you could do. Which of course is a shame, because why do something with only half the know-how? Let me explain in terms of ecology and motion gua sha. And this is the type of gua sha that I do based on an ancient Chinese understanding of the body and its relationship to the natural world. And the reason for this is because when you're dealing with complicated things going on inside the body, it's a good idea to approach it with a set of principles so that we don't get lost in the detail. There really are too many people using meaningless terms or terms they just don't quite understand to justify just about anything with gua sha. So it's important to go for simple clarity, which is true. There are certain functions in the body that are seen by the ancient Chinese as synonymous with how farmers irrigate their land. So let's take the analogy of a situation of a puffy face or swollen legs as a farmer standing in a flooded field. The stream, which is normally meandering happily at the edge of this farmer's land, has become overrun with water and flooded the surrounding area, including that field. So there's the farmer, knee-deep in water, scratching his head without knowing what to do. So when you see your face puffy, and then you think about treating it to reduce the puffiness, are you going to just drain the field of the flood water and just treat the swollen part of the face? If so, what about the place where the river burst its banks upstream? That's where the water's coming from. And what about the excess water in the river, which caused the river to burst its banks in the first place? Shouldn't we do something about that? So let's take a look at some of the causes of puffiness in the terms of these questions. If you've drunk too much alcohol, there's obviously something happening in your liver as it works overtime to process it. This is the upriver cause of puffiness, for example. If it's connected to the food you've eaten or a general diet that you're having, then it's your digestive system and chiefly your stomach which might be behind the puffiness. If you have allergies or an allergic reaction to something, then, and this might sound a bit strange, it's probably connected with your lungs. And if it were due to something like hypothyroidism, then it's more connected with your kidneys. So the flood is coming from somewhere. It didn't just magically appear. The field has drainage ditches dug at the sides and at strategic places so that excess water can be drained from the land, and so it can remain moist and fertile. And that water can then be used elsewhere or returned to the river circulation system. So, of course, you can use this drainage system. So the farmer gets his tools and machinery out and drains the field. How do we do this with gua sha? Well, you generally avoid any swelling or bloating with the gua sha tool. Instead, you work around the edges. If we keep gua sha in its natural context, then we don't concern ourselves with the lymphatic system, and we're not worried about manually moving the liquid with the tool. So this may sound a bit strange to some people, but the lymphatic system isn't a separate system in traditional Chinese medicine. It's already built into the others. Certainly in Western medicine, it's closely related to the cardiovascular system, and it helps maintain the balance of fluid in the body by draining excess fluids from tissues and returning it to the blood system. But with gua sha, both blood and lymph circulatory systems are simultaneously stimulated to work more efficiently. So what you're doing, instead of actually manually moving the fluid, is increasing microcirculation around the swelling so that the liquid is reabsorbed and processed. So if I'm the farmer, I'm not sweeping the water, I'm digging a channel nearby so the water can seep out naturally. But then I'm gonna jump in my tractor and I'm gonna motor my way to where I think the floodwaters came over the riverbank and where I think the river has been blocked. And I'm gonna see if there's any sign of the problem. If there is, then I'm gonna get my tools out and I'm gonna patch it up. So what this means for gua sha is to look for any surface tension along the muscle structures which are along this river system. So if you're puffy because of your diet, then I'm going to check the stomach river system, which includes most of the main structures down the front of your body. And if I find tension, then I use gua sha. And so in this way, I might be able to help to both reduce and prevent the puffiness on the face. If I were treating swelling in any other parts of the body, then the approach would be exactly the same. There's a whole subculture about losing weight with gua sha, which is often about removing excess retention of liquid, especially in the legs. And there's the idea of manually scraping out the liquid. The same farmer analogy can be applied here. If you want to lose weight, you don't just scrape in a simplistic way. You've got to maximize the field area. You've got to improve the irrigation in the river and then look upstream for what might be the origins. And in this case, it's invariably going to be diet and lifestyle. And this is an important idea to grasp. If there are problems here and you don't attend to them, the rest is an uphill struggle. So if my diet was terrible and I didn't take exercise and I led a stressful life, it would be no surprise that the effects of gua sha treatment on the retention of liquid and accumulation of fat might be limited. And it keeps repeating itself. So I encourage you to use gua sha to help remove puffiness, as it's one of the best treatments out there. But use the body's natural intelligence to your full advantage while you do it. If you do that, then you're actually doing facial gua sha.